The envelope landed on Serafina Vale's kitchen table on a cold Tuesday morning, and the moment she saw the handwriting, her stomach dropped. She had not heard from Darian Voss in 2 years. She had not wanted to. She had spent every one of those 700 and some days rebuilding herself from the ground up, stitch by careful stitch, the way a person rebuilds after a fire has taken everything they owned. She had believed, in the way that people believe things they desperately need to be true, that he was gone from her life for good. But there it was, cream-colored paper, thick and expensive, the kind of stationery that announced itself before you even opened it. Her name was written across the front, in Darian's sharp, deliberate hand. She recognized it immediately. She had once found that handwriting beautiful. Now it made her feel the way cold weather felt when you were not dressed for it. Sudden and unwelcome, and cutting straight through to the bone. She did not open it right away. She made herself a cup of tea first, because she had learned over the past 2 years that when something alarming appeared in your life, you did not panic, and you did not run. You steadied yourself, you breathed, you made your tea and you sat down, and you faced the thing like a person who had already survived the worst it had to offer. The letter inside was formal. It was an invitation, gold lettering on heavy cream cardstock, to the grand mating ceremony and gala of the Silverstone Pack. The event was to be held in 3 weeks at the Silverstone Grand Hall, the most prestigious venue in the entire Northern Territory. Serafina read the invitation once, then again, then set it down on the table with the careful movements of someone handling something sharp. She understood immediately. She understood the way you understand a slap, quickly, completely, with no room for confusion. Darian Voss was about to be bonded to Lady Alara Crest, the daughter of one of the most powerful Beta families in the region. The ceremony would be attended by every alpha, every dignitary, every high-ranking family within 3-pack territories. It was going to be the most watched, most talked about social event of the year. And Darian had sent her an invitation. There was a small note tucked behind the invitation card. She almost missed it. It was written in Darian's hand, informal this time, without the careful formality of the printed card. It said, "Thought you should come and see how things turned out. I hope life has been kind to you." Serafina read that note 4 times. She knew exactly what it meant. She had spent enough years around Darian to know precisely how his mind worked, how he used politeness as a weapon, how every smile and every gracious gesture contained a hidden blade. He did not want her there to share in his happiness. He wanted her there so she could witness the distance between where she was and where he had ended up. He wanted her to sit in a room full of powerful, beautiful people and feel small. He wanted her to watch him stand at the front of that grand hall, with Lady Alara on his arm, and understand, once and for all, that he had been right when he said she was not enough. 2 years ago, Darian Voss had rejected her in front of half the Silverstone Pack. He had not done it quietly. He had not pulled her aside and spoken privately. He had done it at a pack gathering, in the main hall, in front of pack members and visiting guests and people Serafina had known her whole life. He had stood up in front of all of them and announced that he was choosing to end the match, that she was not suited to the position of alpha mate, that she lacked the standing and the presence that his future required. He had said it all very calmly, very reasonably, as though he were explaining something obvious, as though the cruelty of it was simply a matter of fact. She still remembered the way the room had gone quiet, the kind of quiet that feels louder than noise. She still remembered the feeling of standing there, in the middle of all those staring faces, with nowhere to hide and nothing to say. Because what could you say to that? What argument do you make against someone telling a room full of people that you are not good enough? She had not cried. She had been proud of herself for that, for a long time afterward. She had walked out of that hall with her head up and her hands steady, and she had not let herself fall apart until she was alone, in her car, on the road out of Silverstone, driving toward a life that she had not yet figured out. She had driven to Caldenmere. It was a neutral territory, not claimed by any single pack, a place where wolves of all backgrounds lived and worked alongside each other, without the rigid social structures that ruled life inside the packs. She had found a small house at the edge of town, near the tree line, and she had set up a clinic. Healing was something Serafina had always known how to do. Her grandmother had taught her the basics of herbal remedies and wound care when she was very young, and she had built on that knowledge quietly, privately, for years, studying, practicing, learning from anyone who would teach her. Inside the Silverstone Pack, that skill had been considered a pleasant hobby, not something a future alpha mate needed to take seriously. But in Caldenmere, with no title and no pack to rely on, her knowledge became her survival. She opened the clinic in the front rooms of her small house. She charged fair prices and nothing extra. She turned no one away, regardless of which pack they belonged to, or whether they could pay at all. Word spread slowly at first, then faster. She was good at what she did. She was better than good. She had a gift for it, for reading people, for listening to what they were not saying, for figuring out not just what was wrong with the body, but what was happening underneath, the fears, and the grief, and the exhaustion that so often made people sick in ways that medicine alone could not fix. Within a year, wolves were traveling from distant territories to see her. She had packed more knowledge and more experience into those 2 years than most healers collected in a decade. She had saved lives. She had helped children grow well. She had given people back things they thought they had lost. She had also met Calum Dracath. But she was not thinking about that yet. She was still sitting at her kitchen table, holding Darian's note, feeling the slow, quiet heat of something building inside her chest. Not grief, not the old familiar ache of that public rejection, which had dulled over time into something manageable. This was different. This was cleaner and sharper and altogether more dangerous. She was angry. Not the hot, chaotic anger she had felt immediately after Darian's rejection, that kind that made it hard to breathe and think clearly. This was the cold kind of anger. The kind that settles into you and stays, that does not make noise, that waits. The kind of anger that asks, "What are you going to do about this?" She turned the invitation over in her hands. The gala was in 3 weeks. Every important figure in the territory would be there. Darian and Alara would stand at the center of it all, golden and beautiful and powerful. And if Seraphina did not go, Darian would take her absence as exactly what he intended it to be. Proof that she was hiding. Proof that she had been buried. Proof that his assessment of her 2 years ago had been correct. And if she went alone, she would be seen exactly as he wanted her to be seen. The rejected mate who had shown up out of pride or sadness, or some complicated combination of both, sitting in the audience, while the man who had humiliated her celebrated his new beginning with another woman. She needed to think. She set the invitation down, drank her tea, and stared out the window at the trees behind her house. The morning light was just beginning to touch their upper branches, pale and thin, the way early autumn light always was in Caldenmere. A bird called somewhere in the distance, one clear note repeated 4 times. She thought about who she was now, not who she had been in Silverstone, not the version of herself that had been shaped by other people's expectations, and Darian Voss's particular idea of what a woman next to him should look like. The woman she was now. The one who had built something real in a neutral town with her own 2 hands, who had learned to trust herself, who had stopped apologizing for taking up space. She thought about the Alpha King. Calum Dracath had first come through her clinic door on a night in early winter, 6 months ago. It had been past midnight. She had woken to the sound of someone knocking, not urgently, not loudly, but steadily, the kind of knock that would not stop. And she had opened the door to find a man so large he nearly filled the frame, holding his left side with one hand, his face completely still. She had not known who he was. She had known only that he was hurt, and that he needed help, and those were the only 2 facts that mattered inside her clinic. She had brought him in, sat him down under the lamp, and looked at the wound. It was unlike anything she had seen before, deep and clean and made by something she could not immediately identify, already beginning to close at the edges with an unusual speed that told her this was a wolf with extraordinary physical resilience. She had worked on him for almost an hour. He had not made a sound the entire time. Most people, in that much pain, made noise. They could not help it. He had sat completely still under her hands, watching her work, with eyes the color of dark water, and had not flinched once. When she finished, she had told him plainly that he needed to rest, that whoever or whatever had done that to him had done it carefully, and that she was not going to ask questions he clearly was not going to answer, but that he needed to sleep before he tried to go anywhere. He had stayed until morning. He had not told her his name. She had not asked. She had given him the small room at the back of the clinic, left water and medicine on the bedside table, and gone to sleep in her own room, with the strange, settled feeling that whatever was happening, it was going to be all right. He had left before she woke up. There was money on the table, far more than she would have charged, and a single line written on the notepad she kept by the door for messages. It said, "Thank you. You are very good at what you do." She had thought she would never see him again. He came back 2 weeks later, no wound this time. He knocked in the same steady, unhurried way, and when she opened the door, he was standing there, in a plain dark coat, looking at her, as though he had simply been wondering how she was. "You came back," she said. "I did," he said. She let him in, because the alternative felt rude, and because there was something about him that made her curious, in spite of herself. He sat at her kitchen table, and they talked for 2 hours about almost nothing important. About Caldenmere, about the winter, about the herbs she had drying in bundles from the kitchen ceiling. He asked about her work with genuine interest. He listened the way very few people listened, completely, without waiting for his turn to speak. He came back again, and again. By the 4th visit, she had started to understand that this was not accidental, that he was not passing through the territory and stopping out of convenience. He was coming because he wanted to. She still did not entirely understand why. She only knew that sitting across from him at her kitchen table, in the quiet of her small house, felt surprisingly easy, natural even, in a way that she would not have expected and could not fully explain. It was on his 5th visit that she learned who he was. One of her regular patients mentioned it, in passing, with the casual certainty of someone stating something obvious. "I saw the Alpha King's car parked at your place again last week." Serafina had stared at the woman for a moment, absolutely still, and then asked her to repeat herself. She had nearly knocked over an entire shelf of tinctures. She had confronted Calum about it the next time he appeared. She had opened the door and looked up at him and said, "You are the Alpha King." He had looked back at her with those dark, steady eyes and said, "Yes." "And you have been coming to my kitchen table," she said. "Yes," he said again. She had let him in, because she did not know what else to do with the information, and because the alternative, shutting the door on the ruler of all 7 pack territories, felt slightly absurd. They had sat at the table again, and she had made tea, and somewhere in the middle of it she had started to laugh, not because anything was funny exactly, but because the situation was so thoroughly unexpected that laughter was the only reasonable response. He had watched her laugh with an expression she could not quite read, not amusement exactly, something quieter and more careful than that. Now, sitting alone at that same table with Darian's invitation in front of her, Serafina thought about Calum Drakath. She thought about the way he had looked at her on his last visit, the way he had paused at the door when he left and said, almost to himself, "You have built something very good here." She thought about the fact that a man who moved the political world of 7 territories came, unprompted and unannounced, to sit in her kitchen and drink her tea. She set the invitation down on the table and pressed her hands flat against the wood, steadying herself. She was going to go to that gala. She had already decided that. She was not going to give Darian Voss the satisfaction of her absence. She was not going to sit in Caldenmere and imagine him looking at the empty seat and smiling to himself. She had worked too hard and come too far to let him have that. But she was not going to go the way he expected her to go. She picked up her phone. She held it for a moment, turning it over in her hands, aware that what she was about to do was either the most dignified decision of her life or the most complicated one, and that the line between those two things was very thin. Then she called Calum Drakath. He answered on the second ring. His voice was the same as it always was, low, unhurried, as though time moved differently around him, and he was never in a rush to get anywhere. "Serafina," he said. "I need to talk to you about something," she said. "If you have time." "I have time," he said. She told him about the invitation. She read him the note. She told him what she understood it to mean, because she wanted him to have the full picture. She told him, plainly and without drama, that she intended to attend but that she was trying to figure out how to do it without walking into exactly the trap Darian had built for her. There was a brief silence on the other end, not an uncomfortable one. With Calum, silence always felt considered rather than empty. "I will come to you tomorrow," he said. "We can talk about it." She opened her mouth to say that she was not asking for his involvement necessarily, that she was just thinking aloud, but he had already said goodbye, and the call was over. She set the phone down on top of Darian's invitation. Outside, the wind moved through the pine trees behind her house, making a sound like breathing. The morning light had grown stronger, filling the kitchen with pale gold, and somewhere across town, the birds that had gone quiet during the first chill of the season were beginning, slowly, to make noise again. Seraphina Vale sat at her table and felt, for the first time in 2 years, the strange, almost frightening feeling of something about to change. Not the uncertain kind of change that comes from loss or fear. A different kind entirely. The kind that comes from a door you have not yet opened. One you can feel on the other side of. Warm and real and waiting. She left the invitation on the table. She did not move it. She did not throw it away. She let it sit there, in the morning light, because it had started something, and she wanted to remember that. She wanted to remember the exact morning it had begun, so that later, when people asked her where the story started, she would be able to say, "It was a Tuesday," and the light came in through the kitchen window and fell across a cream-colored envelope, and I made a phone call, and that was when everything changed. Seraphina had learned, in the 2 years since she left Silverstone, that she had a talent for patience. It was not a talent she had been born with. It was one she had developed, slowly and often painfully, the way you develop any skill that does not come naturally. By practice, by failure, by sitting in the middle of something difficult and making yourself stay. She had needed that patience many times, in the first months after the rejection. There had been days when the whole idea of starting over had felt not just hard, but genuinely impossible, when the gap between where she was and where she wanted to be had seemed too wide to cross, when she had lain awake in her small new house in Caldenmere, listening to the wind in the trees, and wondering what exactly she thought she was doing. But she had learned to breathe through those nights. She had learned to get up the next morning and open the clinic and do the work, and she had learned that the work, done well and done honestly, was its own kind of answer to every hard question. By the time Calum knocked on her door the following afternoon, Seraphina had already put in a full morning of work. She had seen 4 patients, restocked 2 of her remedy shelves, and written 3 letters to suppliers she worked with in the Eastern Territories. She had not spent the morning worrying about the gala, or about Calum's visit, or about any of the complicated things that the last 24 hours had put in motion. She had done the work because the work was hers, and it grounded her. And she had learned that being grounded was one of the most powerful things a person could be. She heard the car before she heard the knock. A vehicle that quiet said money and power more clearly than a loud one ever could. She wiped her hands on a cloth, smoothed the front of her cardigan, and went to the door. Calum was alone. He often came without guards, which had surprised her when she first noticed it. She had assumed, when she learned who he was, that he traveled with a small army of security. But he did not, or at least not when he came here. He stood on her front step in dark clothes, a coat over his shoulders, his silver-streaked black hair pushed back from his forehead by the wind. He looked, as he always did, entirely calm and entirely present, like someone who was never in the wrong place. She stepped back to let him in. He came inside and looked around at the organized chaos of her front rooms, the bundles of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling, the rows of small bottles on the shelves, the large work table with its worn surface and neat tools, with the same quiet attention he brought to everything. "Business was good this morning," he said. It was not a question. "It usually is," she said. "I'll make tea." They settled at the kitchen table. She told him everything, while the kettle boiled, the full context, not just the summary she had given him on the phone. She told him about the rejection, about the gathering in the Silverstone Hall, about standing in front of all those people and finding no words. She had not told him any of this before. She had not told most people. It was not a story she shared easily, because there was no version of it that did not involve being humiliated, and pride made that difficult. But she told him now. She told him clearly, and without unnecessary emotion, the way she would have described a case history to another healer. These are the facts. This is what happened. This is where things stand. She watched him while she spoke. His face gave nothing away in the obvious sense, but she had spent enough time with him by now to see the smaller things, the slight shift in the line of his jaw, the way his hands, which were resting on the table, went very still. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "He sent you the invitation himself, personally." "Yes," she said. "With a handwritten note," he said. "Yes." Another silence. She poured the tea. He watched her do it. Then he said, "He wanted to make sure it reached you. He wanted to make sure you knew it came from him." "That's right," she said. "Then he thought about it beforehand," Calum said. "He chose to do this. He is not someone who acts without thinking." "No," Serafina said. "He is very deliberate about everything." Calum picked up his tea. He drank it without hurry, looking out the kitchen window at the tree line. She waited, because she had learned that when Calum was thinking, the best thing to do was give him space to finish. "I had already planned to attend this gala," he said eventually. She looked at him. "You had?" "Elder Voss has been holding up a trading agreement between 3 of the Pact territories for almost 4 months, Calum said. "The blockage is political rather than practical. I have sent letters. I have sent representatives." He responds courteously and does nothing. "The gala gives me a reason to be in the territory, and his presence at his son's ceremony gives me an opportunity to speak with him directly, in a context where courtesy requires that he listen." He paused. "I was going to go regardless." Serafina turned her cup slowly in her hands. She could see where this was going. She was not sure how she felt about it. "I could take you," Calum said, as simply as though he were offering to carry something heavy. She looked at him steadily. "That is not a small thing," she said. "I know," he said. "If you walk into that gala with me, it means something. People will draw conclusions. They will talk. It will be in every conversation, at every pack gathering for the next 6 months." "Yes," he said. "That does not concern you?" she asked. He looked at her with those dark, level eyes. "Does it concern you?" he asked. She thought about it honestly. She thought about what it would mean to walk into Darien's celebration, not just without fear, but with Calum Dracath at her side. She thought about the look on Darien's face. She thought about Elder Voss and Lady Alara, and every person in that room who had heard the story of her rejection and filed it away as evidence of her inadequacy. She thought about what it would mean for them to see her there, not diminished, not apologetic, but present and whole, and accompanied by a man whose authority no one in any territory could question. She also thought about the other part of it, the part that was harder to look at directly, the part that had to do with why Calum kept coming back to her kitchen, and what it meant that she never once asked him to stop. "It concerns me," she said, because she was honest with herself if nothing else. "But it does not stop me from wanting to go." "Then we will go," Calum said. She looked at him for a long moment. The afternoon light was coming in from the left now, falling across the table in long, warm strips, lighting the edges of things. Calum sat very still in it, the way he always sat, with that quality of absolute presence that she had never found in anyone else. She thought, not for the first time, that he was one of the most extraordinary people she had ever met, and that she had very little idea what to do with that information. "I should tell you something," she said. "All right," he said. "I am not doing this to make him jealous," she said. "I do not want him back. I have not wanted him back since the day I left Silverstone. What he did to me was cruel, and I am not someone who forgives cruelty easily. But this is not about getting revenge. I am not going to that gala to hurt him." Calum nodded slowly. "I know," he said. "Then why do you think I am going?" she asked. She wanted to know if he had understood it. He was quiet for a moment. A bird called outside, 2 short notes, and was quiet again. "Because you are not going to let him decide what your story looks like," Calum said. "You are going because walking away would let him write the ending, and you are the one who writes your endings." She felt the truth of it settle in her chest, quiet and certain. "Yes," she said. "That is exactly it." He picked up his tea again. She watched the steam rising from her own cup. Outside, the wind moved through the pines, and the afternoon light shifted, and the 2 of them sat together in her small kitchen, in the easy way they had somehow fallen into over months of unlikely visits, and neither of them said anything for a while because nothing needed to be said. She was going to go to that gala. Calum was going to be there beside her. Whatever happened after, whatever it meant for both of them, whatever the world chose to make of it, she would deal with that when it came. She had been dealing with things as they came for 2 years now, and she had not collapsed yet. She trusted herself. That was the thing she had learned, over and above all the other lessons. She trusted herself. 3 weeks was enough time to be ready for anything. What she did not know yet was that Darian Voss had already received word from sources inside the neutral territories that Serafina Vale was not the quiet, private person she had become in Caldenmere. He had received word that she was well regarded, that she was skilled, that people in multiple pack territories trusted and respected her. He had received this news and had not known what to do with it, because it did not fit the story he had been telling himself about her since the day he let her go. He told himself, when the discomfort became too sharp, that it did not matter. She was still just a healer in a neutral town. Whatever she had built was small, private, personal. It would not matter beside what he had built. It would not matter beside who he was now, and who Alara was, and what their ceremony was going to look like in front of every powerful figure in the territory. He was going to be magnificent, and she was going to see it. That was still the plan. He was certain of it. The week before the gala began with a knock on Serafina's door that she did not expect. She had opened it to find a woman standing there holding a long white garment bag, a leather kit box at her feet, and the kind of expression that suggested she was a person accustomed to being let in without having to explain herself. She was perhaps 50, with neat gray hair and a measuring tape already around her neck. "I am Dorothea," the woman said. "I was sent." Serafina looked at the garment bag. She looked at the leather box. She looked at Dorothea. "By whom?" she asked. Dorothea gave her a look that suggested the answer was obvious, and that explaining it would waste both of their time. The garment bag, when Serafina stepped back to let her in, was unzipped to reveal fabric the color of the deepest part of the night sky. Indigo silk, heavy and smooth, with the faintest trace of silver thread woven through it, that caught the light when it moved. It was the most beautiful piece of clothing Serafina had looked at in years. There was a small card tucked inside the bag. It said, in Calem's deliberate handwriting, "For the gala. If you want it. If you already have something, please ignore this entirely." She stood looking at the dress for a long moment. Dorothea waited with professional patience. "I will wear it," Serafina said. She called her friend Mira that evening. Mira lived in Caldenmere too, had moved there a year after Serafina, drawn by the combination of good prices and community, and the fact that Serafina was there. Mira was one of the few people in the world who could be trusted with the full truth of any situation, largely because she had very strong opinions about everything, and never pretended otherwise. Serafina told her everything. About Darian's invitation, about the note, about Calem's offer, and the dress that had arrived that afternoon, and was currently hanging from her wardrobe door like a piece of the night sky. Mira listened to all of it. When Serafina finished, there was a silence that lasted about 4 seconds, which for Mira was an eternity. "Calem Dracath," Mira said. "The Alpha King." "Yes," Serafina said. "Has been coming to your kitchen table," Mira said. "For 6 months," Serafina said. Another silence. "Sarah," Mira said. "Do you understand what you are saying to me right now? Because I want to make sure I have the facts correctly. The Alpha King, the ruler of the 7 territories, the most powerful wolf on the continent, has been coming to your house, voluntarily, to drink tea. Chamomile usually," Serafina said. "And now he is taking you to the gala," Mira said. "He is personally escorting you to Darian Voss's mating ceremony." "That is the plan," Serafina said. "Because you called him and told him about the invitation," Mira said. "Yes." "And he said he would take you." "He said he was going anyway, and that he would take me," Serafina said, because precision felt important. Mira made a sound that contained several different emotions at once. "Sarah, my love, my darling. The Alpha King does not go to pack galas. He has not attended a pack social function in years. His attending this one is not about a trade agreement. You know that, right? You know that the trade agreement is an excuse?" Serafina was quiet. "Tell me you have thought about this," Mira said. "I have thought about it," Serafina said. And I do not know what it means yet," Serafina said honestly, "but I know that I trust him, and I know that going to that gala with him beside me is the right thing for reasons that go beyond Darian, and beyond whatever politics are in play. It feels right in a way I cannot fully explain, and I have learned to listen when something feels that way." Mira was quiet for a moment. Then she said, in a much softer voice, "Is he good to you?" "Yes," Serafina said, without hesitation. "Does he see you?" Mira asked. Not the healer, not the competent person, not the useful resource. Does he see you, specifically, as a person? Serafina thought about the way Calum listened, the way he remembered things she had mentioned in passing months ago, the way he had come back, again and again, to a small house in a neutral town, when he could have been anywhere in 7 territories, the way he had looked at her, the previous afternoon in her kitchen, and understood, without her having to over-explain, exactly why she needed to go to that gala. Yes, she said, he does. Mira exhaled. All right, she said, then go, wear the dress, walk into that hall, and let Darian see what he gave up when he was too foolish to recognize what was standing in front of him. That is not why I am going, Serafina said, for the 2nd time in 2 days. I know, Mira said, but it will be a very satisfying side effect. In the Silverstone territory, preparations for the gala were in full swing. The hall had been booked for a month. The guest list, already long, had been expanded twice. Alara's family had contributed extensively, because the Crest family had money and enjoyed spending it on things people would talk about. There were flowers ordered from growers in 4 different territories. There was imported wine and food and a string ensemble that had cost more than most wolves made in a year. Darian stood at the center of all of it and felt, for the most part, exactly as he had expected to feel. Capable, certain, important. He was making the right decision. Alara was the right choice, steady, well-connected, beautiful in the way that read well from across a room. Their match had been approved by her family and by Elder Voss and by every practical consideration that mattered. It was a good decision. He did not think about Serafina often. When he did, it was briefly, and with the comfortable certainty that he had been correct, 2 years ago, in his assessment of the situation. She had been sweet. She had been kind. But kindness and sweetness were not the qualities a future alpha mate needed to carry, and he had known it even then. He had made the right call. He had always known that. The invitation had been his mother's idea, technically, though she would deny it later. She had said, over dinner one evening, in her particular way of saying things that sounded like observations, but were in fact suggestions, I wonder whatever happened to that Vale girl. What she is doing with herself these days. And something in Darian had tightened at the question, something he did not examine too closely, and the invitation had materialized in his mind fully formed, with the note already written in it. He told himself it was magnanimous. He told himself he was giving her closure, an opportunity to see that things had worked out well, that there were no hard feelings. He believed this the way people believe comfortable things, selectively and without looking too hard at the edges. He did not know, yet, that Serafina had called Calum Drakath. He did not know that the Alpha King was planning to attend his ceremony. He did not know that the woman he had dismissed as unworthy was about to walk into his night with someone beside her who would make every other person in the room understand, in one single moment, exactly how wrong he had been. He was still certain, right up until 3 days before the event, that everything was going to go exactly as planned. Then Elder Voss received a formal communication from the royal residence. A brief message, politely worded, informing him that the Alpha King would be in attendance at the gala and looked forward to the occasion. Elder Voss read it twice. He set it down on his desk. He picked it up and read it again. Then he called his son. Darian picked up the phone on the first ring. He heard his father's voice and immediately knew from the tone of it that something had changed, something significant. His father was not a man who alarmed easily, and what Darian heard in his voice was not alarm exactly, but the precise, controlled tension of a man recalibrating very quickly. The Alpha King is coming to your ceremony, Elder Voss said. Darian was quiet for a moment. That is an honor, he said carefully. The question I am asking myself, Elder Voss said, is why? Another silence. Have you extended an invitation to anyone that I do not know about? His father asked. Anyone who might have a connection to the royal circle? Darian thought about the cream envelope, the handwritten note, the name on the front. No, he said, no one like that. His father was quiet on the other end. Darian could hear him thinking, could almost follow the careful movements of his mind as it turned the question over. It is most likely political, Elder Voss said finally. The trade agreement. He wants to address it directly. Yes, Darian said. That must be it. But something in him was not settled. Something in him had shifted, quietly, in a way he could not identify. He set the phone down and sat for a moment in his study, surrounded by the evidence of his success, the good furniture, the framed photographs, the stack of correspondence from important people, and he felt, for reasons he could not name, as though the ground under his feet had changed texture. He shook it off. There was too much to do before the gala for him to sit here and worry about things that did not make sense. The Alpha King was coming for political reasons, that was all. It had nothing to do with him, or with his choices, or with the cream-colored envelope he had sent to a small house in Caldenmere 3 weeks ago. He told himself this firmly. He almost believed it. The morning of the gala, Serafina woke before her alarm. She lay still in the darkness for a moment, aware of the particular quality of the silence in her house, the absence of wind, the deep quiet that came before dawn, when even the birds had not yet decided to begin. She had slept well, which surprised her a little. She had expected to lie awake with her thoughts. Instead, she had fallen asleep quickly, and slept all the way through, and she woke feeling clear and rested, the way you feel when you have made a decision that sits right in your body. She got up. She made coffee. She worked in the clinic for 2 hours in the morning, seeing to 2 appointments she had kept because they were important, and because staying in motion helped her. She organized the shelves. She wrote in her notes. She did the ordinary things that made up the ordinary texture of her life, because she did not want the gala to feel like it was the entire story. It was one evening, one moment, one small part of a much larger thing she was building. Dorothea arrived at 2 in the afternoon, and did not leave until nearly 5. She was quiet and skilled, and treated the whole process with a focused professionalism that Serafina appreciated. There was no chatter about what it all meant, or who Calum was, or what people would say. There was only the careful, precise work of making sure everything was exactly right. When Dorothea finally stepped back and handed Serafina a small mirror, Serafina looked at herself and was quiet for a moment. She looked like herself. That was the first thing she noticed, and it was the thing that mattered most. She did not look like a costume, or a performance, or a statement. She looked like herself, the full, complete version that she had been growing toward for 2 years, finally visible all at once. The dress moved with her when she moved, the indigo silk catching the light in exactly the way she had noticed when it first came out of the bag, as though it were made from something real and living, rather than just fabric. Her hair was up, simply, with no effort to elaborate. She wore no jewelry except small dark earrings that had been her grandmother's. She looked, in the plainest possible terms, exactly like who she was. Calum arrived at 6. She heard the car and came to the door herself, because she had no one else to answer it, and because she wanted to be the one to open it. He stood on her front step in black, precise and dark as ever, with the quiet gold insignia of the royal line at his lapel, that she had not seen him wear before. He looked at her for a moment before he said anything. Just looked, with the same quality of attention he brought to everything, complete and unhurried. "You look well," he said. She did not correct him. "Thank you," she said. He held out his hand. She took it because it was the right thing to do in that moment, and because his hand was warm and steady, and taking it felt exactly as natural as everything between them had always felt, which was to say surprisingly so, and not something she was going to analyze on the doorstep when there was a gala to get to. The car was long and dark and quiet inside, and as it moved out of Caldenmere and toward the Silverstone territory, Serafina looked out the window at the evening light falling across the pine trees, and felt, quite simply, that she was ready. Mira had called that afternoon to wish her luck. She had said, "Walk in like the room already belongs to you, because it does." Serafina had said, "I do not want the room to belong to me. I just want to walk into it without shrinking." Same thing, Mira had said. Same exact thing. Now, in the dark car, with the trees moving past outside and Calum sitting beside her with the still, solid presence that she had come to know well, Serafina thought that Mira was probably right. She thought about the last 2 years and what she had built in them, the clinic, the work, the quiet life she had made for herself in a town that was nobody's territory but her own. She thought about all the mornings she had gotten up when getting up was hard, and all the patients she had helped when she had felt, privately, like she was barely holding her own weight, and all the slow, careful lessons of those years that had taught her who she actually was. She thought about Darian in his grand hall, certain and comfortable and completely unprepared. She thought about walking through those doors. For the first time in a long time, she let herself smile at a thought like that. Just briefly, Just enough to feel it. The car moved through the darkness, heading toward Silverstone, and everything that was going to happen next was on the other side of a door she had not yet opened. She was not afraid of it. She had stopped being afraid of things she could walk through rather than around. She was ready. The Silverstone Grand Hall sat at the top of a wide stone road lined with pine trees, and even from a distance, through the car window, Serafina could see that it was lit from end to end. Every window glowed, warm and golden, and the sound of the gathering inside reached them even before the car had fully stopped. Voices, the low pulse of a string ensemble, the particular bright energy of a large crowd in its most polished form. There were other cars arriving. She could see them through the window, a steady, orderly procession of dark vehicles depositing well-dressed couples at the bottom of the wide front steps. She recognized some of the names on the door panels as the car moved through the queue. Families she had known in Silverstone, dignitaries from neighboring pack territories, people who had been important in her old world and had remained important in it after she left. She was very still in the car, not tense, still. There was a difference. Tension was held breath and tight muscles, and the body fighting itself. What she felt was more like the quiet, before something precise happens, a clarity, rather than a contraction. She watched the figures moving up the front steps and thought, I know that feeling. I know what it is to walk into a room full of people who know something about your story that they did not learn from you. Calum, beside her, said nothing. He had said very little in the car, which she did not find strange. They had long ago established that silence between them was a comfortable thing, not a gap to be filled. The car reached the front of the queue. A valet opened the door. She stepped out first. The night air hit her, cool, with the faint sweetness of the pine trees and the warmth of the lit hall above her. She stood for a moment at the bottom of the steps, just long enough to feel her own feet on the ground, to feel the weight of herself. Then she heard Calum's door, and she heard his step on the stone behind her, and she heard, at the same time, the quality of the sound from the top of the stairs change. It was not one person noticing. It was many people, in sequence, like a wave moving through water, one person turning, and then the next, and then the next, and the noise from inside, that warm, buzzing, celebratory hum, pulling back slightly, quieting at the edges, the way a crowd goes quiet when something in the room shifts. She climbed the steps. Calum moved beside her, one hand resting at her back, the light touch of someone who is present rather than guiding, allowing rather than directing. She felt it, steady and warm through the fabric of the dress, and she let herself accept it, because it was offered without demand, and because it helped, and she was not going to pretend otherwise. The doors were open. They stepped inside. The Grand Hall was exactly as she remembered it from years ago, when she had attended events here as part of the Silverstone Pack. High ceilings with iron rafters, long tables dressed with white cloth, candles in crystal holders at every setting. The walls hung with deep green fabric for the occasion. It was beautiful. She had always thought so. The beauty of it did not intimidate her now. It simply was what it was, a well-dressed space full of people, and she was one of the people in it. What happened next took approximately 3 seconds. 3 seconds for the wave of noticing to complete itself. For the nearest clusters of guests to turn, for their eyes to find her and then move to Calum and then widen, for the connections to be made, for the information to pass from face to face with the speed that information travels in a room full of people who know each other. She watched it happen. She watched the moment travel, person to person, across the room. The string ensemble, at the far end of the hall, did not stop playing, but the sound of it became suddenly very clear, very distinct, because the ambient noise of the crowd had dropped by more than half in the space of those 3 seconds. People looked at her. She looked back, pleasantly, not with defiance but without apology. She had nothing to apologize for. She had been invited. She saw Elder Voss at the far right of the room, standing with a group of older pack leaders. She watched him receive the information visually, saw the moment his gaze found them, saw the slight, controlled shift in his expression, the experienced diplomat's effort to keep his face neutral. He was good at it. Most people would have missed it. She had spent years reading people, and she did not miss it. She saw Lady Alara near the center of the room, beautiful in deep cream silk, her hand on the arm of a woman who was clearly her mother, the two of them having a conversation that stopped mid-sentence when Alara's eyes crossed the room and found the entrance. She did not see Darian immediately. She looked, because it was better to know where he was than not to, and found him near the receiving line, at the hall's eastern wall, talking to two men she did not recognize. She saw him hear about it before he looked up, saw him register a change in the room, saw him turn to his companion and catch some expression or word there, and then raise his eyes toward the entrance. She was ready for the moment when he found her. She had been ready for it for 3 weeks, in the quiet way that a person prepares for a thing they are not sure how to feel about until it actually comes. She held herself the same way she always held herself, straight, without performance, without self-consciousness, just here, just present, just herself. Darian Voss looked at her from across the Silverstone Grand Hall that he had spent a month preparing, at the woman he had rejected in that same building 2 years ago, and he saw what was beside her. He went very still. From that distance, she could not read his face precisely, but she could read the shape of it, the sudden absence of movement, the quality of arrested motion, a person whose momentum has stopped because something unexpected has interrupted the path it was on. He had expected her absence. He had possibly prepared himself for her presence, alone and diminished, but he had not prepared for this. You could not prepare for this, because this was not something you could have predicted. She looked at him for exactly as long as it took her to confirm that she felt nothing sharp, nothing desperate, nothing that wanted to reach across the room and either wound him or explain itself to him. She felt instead something much simpler, a kind of completion, a quiet closing of a door that had been left slightly ajar for 2 years, without her fully realizing it. She saw him. She saw him clearly, and she understood that this moment was not about him at all. It never had been. She turned her eyes away. Calum said, quietly, close enough that only she could hear, "Shall we find our seats?" "Yes," she said. They moved through the room, and it parted ahead of them, the way water moves around something solid, and the evening was just beginning. The seating arrangements at the Silverstone Grand Hall had been planned for months. Ilara's mother had overseen the floor plan personally, which meant that every table assignment carried a meaning, a signal about standing, and favor, and the delicate social calculations that governed pack gatherings. It was a language Serafina had grown up speaking fluently, and she read it automatically, the way you read your native language without effort. She understood, when they were shown to their table, exactly what it meant. They were at the central dais. Not a side table, not a position of modest courtesy, set somewhere visible but not prominent. The central dais, raised slightly above the floor of the hall, set at the exact center of the room, visible from every angle, the table traditionally reserved for the guest of highest standing. The table where the mating couple themselves would eventually sit, surrounded by whoever they had decided to honor most. She heard, at the edge of her awareness, the swift and quiet sound of the seating arrangements being renegotiated. A word from the event coordinator, low and rapid. 2 table settings moved. A subtle ripple of adjustment that most guests would not notice but that the people managing the evening would feel keenly. Elder Voss had made the call himself, she suspected, quickly and without hesitation, because not accommodating the Alpha King at the appropriate level would have been a more visible error than the rearrangement. She sat down. Calum sat beside her. He did not seem to register any of it as unusual, because to him it probably was not. She suspected very strongly that every room he had ever walked into had arranged itself around him in some way. The dinner hour began. She had expected to feel watched. She was watched. She could feel it. The attention of a room that had been expecting one kind of evening, and was now recalibrating around something quite different. But being watched did not destabilize her the way it once would have. She had learned, over 2 years of running a clinic in a town where everyone eventually knew your business, that being seen was not the same as being exposed. You could be visible and still be entirely yourself. She ate. She drank the wine, which was good. She spoke to Calum in the easy, natural way she had always spoken to him, about small things that had nothing to do with the occasion. A case she had seen that week, an unusual plant she had come across in the Caldenmere Hills, a letter she had received from a healer in the Eastern Territories who wanted to know about some of her methods. She spoke and he listened, and he responded, and it was exactly like being at her kitchen table, which felt exactly right. People came to the dais. Of course they did. Alpha families, beta dignitaries, pack leaders, who wanted to pay their respects to Calum, and who used that approach to look at her, clearly, and with undisguised curiosity. Calum handled these interactions with the practiced ease of someone who had been doing this for decades. He was courteous to everyone, and intimate with no one. He introduced her, each time, not with an explanation or a title, but simply with her name and the territory she was from, and the weight he gave that name, unhurried and complete, as though there were no other name he would have rather said, did more than any explanation could have done. She watched the room understand something. She could see it happening in real time, the way people adjusted their assessments mid-conversation, the way they left the dais with different expressions from the ones they had arrived with. She was not performing anything. She was not managing their perceptions. She was simply being exactly who she had become, and who she had become was enough. More than enough, apparently, for a room full of people who had been trained by years of pack hierarchy to recognize what sufficiency looked like. She was thinking about this, with a quiet kind of wonder, when Lady Alara appeared at the edge of the dais. She was everything Serafina had anticipated, elegant, composed, beautiful in the particular way that came from generations of wealth and careful presentation. The cream silk gown was perfectly chosen, her hair was exactly right. She carried herself with the practiced confidence of someone who had known, from a very young age, that rooms were supposed to take notice of her when she walked into them. She looked at Serafina with an expression that was precisely balanced between warmth and something sharper, the social equivalent of a hand extended with a blade hidden in the sleeve. "Serafina," she said, "what a surprise to see you here. You look lovely." Serafina met her eyes. "Alara," she said, "congratulations. I hope you and Darien have a wonderful evening." Alara's smile did not change. "How generous," she said. "It must be a strange thing, being here tonight." "Not particularly," Serafina said pleasantly. A pause. Alara's eyes moved briefly to Calum, who had not looked up from the conversation he was having with a pack elder to Serafina's left, and then back. "Still," Alara said, "we appreciate that you made the trip. Darien did so want to see you well." "That is very kind," Serafina said. "You both seem very well. Enjoy your ceremony." And she turned back to her plate, not rudely, not sharply, but with the simple completion of someone whose attention has moved on. Alara stood for precisely 1 second more, then turned and walked back into the room with the careful pace of someone maintaining composure by counting steps. Calum, without turning, said quietly, "That was well handled." "She is not a villain," Serafina said. "She is marrying someone who told her the story from his point of view. She believes the version she was given." "Most people do," Calum said. "Yes," she said. "That is why the version matters." She picked up her wine. Across the room, she could see Darien speaking with his father near the edge of the hall, the two of them with their heads together, Elder Voss's expression the careful controlled blank of a man managing a situation. Darien was not looking at the dais. He was making a considerable effort not to look at the dais, which she found, privately and without malice, almost poignant. He had built this evening to show her something. He had wanted it to be the final word, and instead, it had become something else entirely. Something he had not written, and could not control, and she could see in the set of his shoulders, and the angle of his head, that he was trying to decide how to respond to that. She hoped he found a way through it. She meant that without irony. She did not want him to suffer. She was not carrying enough of the old wound to want that for him. She wanted him to have a good life, the one he had chosen, with the person he had chosen. She simply also wanted, very clearly and without apology, to be seen accurately in his world by the people who had seen his version of her for 2 years. The evening moved forward. The string ensemble played. The food was excellent. Calum spoke with Elder Voss when the older man finally approached the dais with his careful diplomat smile, and the conversation was brief and specific, and Serafina watched the elder understand, clearly, and without being told directly, that the trade agreement needed to move forward, that the window for polite delays had closed, and that this visit to the gala had served more than one purpose. It was done in perhaps 12 minutes. It was very neatly done. She thought, this is what authority without cruelty looks like. It does not raise its voice. It does not threaten. It simply appears, and makes the thing clear, and moves on. She wanted to be that, she realized. Not in the same way, not in Calum's particular form of it, because she was not him, and had no desire to be. But she wanted that quality, the ability to change a room, not by force but by presence, by the simple sufficiency of being fully, unapologetically herself. She thought she might already be partway there. The interlude before the ceremony began. The tables were rearranged slightly to open the floor. The overhead candles were dimmed, and the ones at the front of the hall increased. The room shifted from dinner toward something more ceremonial, and the quality of the noise changed. Quieter, more expectant, the hum of an audience settling into its seats. Serafina watched it all with the attention she brought to everything, interested in the details, the texture of the evening. She was here. She was present. She had walked through the door and been seen, and had not flinched. Whatever came next, she had already done the thing that mattered. She did not know yet that the most significant part of the evening was still ahead. She did not know what Calum was going to say when Elder Voss made his one final diplomatic miscalculation of the night and invited the Alpha King to address the room. She did not know that by the end of that evening, the story that had been told about her in this territory for 2 years was going to be rewritten in front of everyone who had told it. She held her glass and watched the candles, and she was very, very ready. Darian Voss found her on the stone terrace between the first and second floors during the interlude. She had stepped out for air, which was something she had needed, not from distress but from the accumulated density of the evening, all that watching and being watched, all that careful social navigation, all those quiet assessments flying through the room like arrows in the dark. She needed 3 minutes of pine-scented air and the particular quiet of outdoors, and she had taken them. She should have known he would follow. She heard his footsteps behind her and turned before he reached her. She had always had good instincts about Darian. She had known, from very early in their time together, the exact quality of each kind of approaching footstep, the confident one, the controlled one, the one that meant he had made a decision and was coming to deliver it. This footstep was the controlled one. He had composed himself before leaving the hall. He had prepared what he was going to say. He stopped a few feet from her. In the half-light from the hall windows above, she could see him clearly enough. Still handsome, still composed, still carrying himself with the particular assurance of a man who had always been told he was remarkable. He was dressed for the occasion perfectly. He looked like the host of a very successful event, which he was. He looked at her for a moment. She let him. She had nothing to hide. "You came," he said. "You invited me," she said. "I did not expect you to actually come." "I know," she said. He moved a step closer. His voice dropped. "What are you doing here, Sarah? What is this? Showing up with him? What are you trying to prove?" "I am not trying to prove anything," she said. "You sent me an invitation. I accepted it." "With the Alpha King," he said, and the words came out, with an edge she recognized. Something underneath the control. Something that wanted to be louder than he was allowing it. "We came together, yes," she said. "Why? What is the point? The evening is mine. The ceremony is mine. Whatever you came here to do, it is not going to change anything." She looked at him. She looked at him, with all the clarity of 2 years, and all the hard-won knowledge of those years, and she felt very little. She had expected to feel more, some residue of the old hurt, some remnant of the anger, or the grief. There was something there, a thin, distant ache like the memory of a bruise, but it was not sharp, it was not alive. She said, "Darian, I did not come here to change anything. I came here because you sent me a note, telling me to come and see how things turned out, and I thought it was important for me to see that I am not afraid to walk into a room you are in. That was it. That was all." He stared at her. The controlled expression slipped. Slightly. Just slightly. "You could have said that from Caldenmere," he said. "You did not need to come here and bring him." "He wanted to come," she said, "for his own reasons. I did not manufacture that." "His own reasons," Darian said, and something in his voice had changed, shifted into something slower and more careful, something that was trying to understand what it was looking at. "He has been at your clinic. I heard about that. People talk." "People always talk," she said. "What is he to you?" Darian asked, and then, more quietly, "What are you to him?" She looked at him for a moment. She thought about how to answer this, and then decided the honest answer was the only one worth giving. "I do not know yet," she said. "We are still finding out." He absorbed that. He looked away, then back. He was quiet for a moment. That was not comfortable, but was, at least, real. More real than anything they had said to each other tonight. Possibly more real than many things they had said to each other, in all the time they were together. "He is the Alpha King," Darian said. "He is." "I know who he is," she said. Another silence. "I was not trying to hurt you," he said finally, and she heard in it the complicated, imperfect truth of someone who had never fully faced what he had done. "When I ended things, I thought it was the right decision. I thought I was being clear about what I needed." "You were clear," she said. "You were very clear. Publicly." He had the grace to look away at that. "I could have done it differently," he said. "Yes," she said. "You could have." She waited to see if this was going somewhere, if he had something more to offer. Not an apology exactly, she was not looking for that, but some kind of acknowledgement that what he had done had weight and consequence, and had not been, as she suspected he had been telling himself, simply a practical decision cleanly made. What she got instead was a shadow. Not a dramatic arrival, just a presence, appearing on the terrace at the edge of her peripheral vision. Calum, standing in the doorway from the hall, entirely still, his hands in his coat pockets, looking at the two of them with the expression he wore when he was listening to something, and had not yet decided to intervene. He had not made a sound. He had simply appeared, the way large and very certain things sometimes simply appear, not needing to announce themselves. Darian saw him. The change in Darian's body was involuntary and immediate. She had seen many things happen to him over the years, but she had never seen him step back from anything. He stepped back now. Not dramatically, not in a full retreat, but the single step of a body that has received information and responded to it before the mind had finished processing. He looked from Calum to Serafina, and then back. He pressed his lips together. He straightened his jacket. "Enjoy the rest of the evening," he said. His voice was controlled. He had pulled himself back behind the mask. He walked back inside. Serafina did not watch him go. She turned and looked at Calum, who had come to stand beside her at the terrace railing, looking out at the dark trees below. "I did not need you to rescue me," she said. "I know," he said. "I came out for air." She looked at him. His profile in the half-light was calm and still, and she was quite certain he had not come out for air. "Calum," she said. "You had already handled it," he said. "I could hear from inside the door." "You were listening," she said. "No," he said. "I was near the door, and your voice carries more than you probably realize when you are being very precise about something." She turned back to the trees. She felt the clean, pine-cold air moving over her face, and she thought about what Darian had said, and what she had said back, and the thin sound of his voice, when he said he had not been trying to hurt her. She thought about how little that changed anything, and also how it was not nothing. "He will be all right," she said. "He will go back inside and marry her, and the evening will continue, and in 2 weeks, nobody will be talking about this." "Probably," Calum said. "And I will go back to Caldenmere and open the clinic on Monday, and it will all be exactly what it was before." "Yes," he said. "Except it will not," she said. "Not entirely." He was quiet. "Something is finished," she said. "Something that had still been open, I think. Some part of it." "The part that still wondered," Calum said. She looked at him. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the trees, the dark line of them against the darker sky, but his words had landed exactly where they needed to. "Yes," she said. "The part that still wondered." The terrace was quiet. The sound of the string ensemble reached them faintly from inside, a slow, formal piece that signaled the ceremony was about to begin. "We should go back," she said. "Yes," he said. He held the door for her. She went inside. She felt the warmth of the hall close around her, and she walked back toward the dais, and she was finished wondering. She was done with that. Whatever came next, for her, for Calum, for the life she was building in Caldenmere, she was walking toward it without the weight of the unfinished past on her shoulders. And she did not understand, until she felt the absence of it, how much it had weighed. The room that had been quietly buzzing all evening found its stillness in stages. First the movement stopped, the cross-floor conversations, the careful social orbits, the glass-to-glass drift of a crowd managing its own energy. Then the voices came down, one cluster at a time, until the only sound was the string ensemble completing its piece, and then going quiet too, the final note hanging in the air for a moment before dissolving. Elder Voss stood at the front of the hall. He was a commanding figure, tall, with a deliberate bearing that had served him well for decades, and the room gave him attention naturally. He spoke about his son, about the Voss family, about the honor of the occasion. He spoke about Lady Alara and the Crest family, about the joining of two great bloodlines, about what the evening represented for the Silverstone pack. He was very good at speaking to rooms. He always had been. Then he paused. He looked toward the central dais with the expression of a man who has made a calculation and believes it to be correct. He said, in the warm and welcoming tone of someone extending a great honor, "We are deeply privileged this evening to have with us the Alpha King. Your presence honors all of us. We would be grateful beyond words if you would care to offer a few remarks." The room turned toward the dais. Every face, all at once, oriented toward Calum, with the focused attention of a crowd expecting something significant. Serafina felt Calum go very still beside her, not the stillness of surprise, more the stillness of a person who has made a decision and is settling into it. She had seen that quality in him before. It meant he was about to speak carefully. He rose. The room completed its silence. He did not rush to begin. He stood for a moment at the edge of the dais, looking at the assembled faces with the unhurried patience that was one of the things she had come to know best about him, the sense that he had decided how much time this moment was worth, and was not going to allocate more or less. He thanked Elder Voss. He thanked the Voss family and the Crest family for an evening of genuine warmth. He offered his good wishes for the bonded couple, with the brief, sincere grace of someone who meant it without needing to elaborate. Then he paused. "I want to say something," he said, "about legacy." The room was very quiet. "Legacy is a word we use a great deal in the pack world," he said. "We speak of it in connection to families, to bloodlines, to ceremonies like this one, and that is not wrong. But I have been thinking, this evening, about a different kind of legacy. The kind built not in public, in front of crowds, but quietly, and without applause. The kind that grows slowly, and is tested not by how many people witness it, but by how many people are genuinely changed by it." He was speaking to the room, but she felt the words with the particular attention of someone who suspects they are being addressed directly and is listening with every part of herself. "I know someone who built exactly that kind of legacy," he said. "She built it in a small town, in a modest clinic, with her own hands and her own knowledge, and an extraordinary willingness to be useful to people who needed her. She built it after being told, by someone in a position of authority over her, that she was not sufficient for the life he had imagined. And she took that assessment and she set it aside, and she went and built something real. Something that will outlast anything that was said about her in this room, or any room like it. Not a sound. The string ensemble had packed up. The servers stood motionless at the edges of the hall. 300 people held their breath. "The standard by which we should measure the worth of any person," Calum said, "is not their standing, or their bloodline, or the name of the pack that carries them. It is what they do, with what they have, what they build, who they become when no one is watching, when there is no ceremony and no crowd, and only the plain daily work of being alive." He picked up his glass. He said simply, "To the evening, and to the people in this room who have spent their lives building things that are real." He sat down. The applause was immediate, but she was not listening to it. She was aware of it, aware of the energy in the room, as 300 people responded to what they had just heard. But her attention was turned inward, settling around the words like water finding its level. She was looking at the table in front of her. Her hands were resting on the white cloth. She was breathing carefully, evenly, the way she had learned to breathe when something was happening inside her that was too large to process quickly and needed time. She felt eyes on her, many of them. She knew what the room was doing. It was finding her. It was connecting what Calum had said to the woman sitting beside him. It was revising. She could feel the revision happening. She could feel the story about her shifting in real time, the version that had been in circulation for 2 years, the woman who had been found wanting, the woman who had not been enough, dissolving, and being replaced with something else, something true. She did not look at Darian. She did not need to. Whatever was on his face right now was his to carry. Calum, beside her, poured more wine without looking at her. He set the bottle down. Then, very quietly, he said. I meant it. She looked at him. His eyes were on the room, on the still settling crowd, on the dignified management of Elder Voss at the front of the hall, who was moving the evening forward with the smooth professionalism of someone who has been surprised but is not going to show it. I know, she said. And she did. She had known, before he said it, in the way that you know certain things, not because you have been told them, but because you have been paying attention for long enough that the knowledge simply arrives, complete. She picked up her glass. She drank. The wine was still excellent. The candles still burned in their crystal holders. The string ensemble, recovering, began a soft, slow piece that filled the hall with sound again. The evening moved forward. But in the space between what had been said and what was still being understood, something had permanently changed. Not only the room's assessment of her, though that was real and she could feel it, but something inside herself, something that had to do with being seen, not by a crowd, not by the people who had dismissed her, or the people who were now revising their opinions, but by one specific person, whose witness she had come to value, without fully realizing how much, until this moment. She thought, this is what it feels like when someone who understands you says so out loud. She thought, this is the thing I did not know I was missing. She looked at the candles. She listened to the music. She sat in the center of a room that was still adjusting its understanding of who she was, and she let it, because she was not afraid of being seen anymore, and because the woman being seen now was the one she had worked for 2 years to become, and she was not ashamed of her. They left before the bonding ritual completed. There was a point, somewhere in the final hour of the evening, when Serafina understood that she had received everything the night had to give her. The important conversations were done. The important moments had already happened. What remained was ceremony and social winding down, and she had sat in enough pack ceremonies to know how long the unwinding could take, and she did not need any more of it. She said to Calum, quietly, I am ready to go. He was on his feet before she finished the sentence. They made their exits the way they had made their entrance, simply, without announcement, with the easy, unhurried quality of people who were not asking permission from the room. There were a few parting words, a few hands extended and clasped, the kind of brief farewells that happened when a crowd understood that the most important person in the room was leaving and did not want to make more of it than necessary. Elder Voss caught Calum's eye near the door and gave him a nod that contained several different meanings, and probably a great deal of the trade agreement. Then the doors were behind them, and the cool night air replaced the warmth of the hall, and the sound of the gathering became distant and muffled, and Serafina stood at the top of the stone steps and breathed. She breathed for a long moment. Clean air, pine, the faint cold sweetness of an autumn night. The sky above was clear and very dark, and she could see more stars than the hall's lights had allowed for, and she stood in the quiet and let the evening settle. The car arrived. Calum held the door. She got in. They did not talk immediately. The car moved away from the stone steps, through the line of pines, onto the road back toward Caldenmere. She watched the lights of the hall recede in the rear window, until the trees closed over them, and there was only dark. She said, I want to tell you something. All right, he said. I went tonight because I was not going to let him decide what my story looked like, she said. That was the reason I had, the one I could name and explain. I know, he said. But there was another reason, she said. One, I did not fully understand until the terrace, or maybe until what you said during the toast. I went tonight because I wanted to know if I was finished. If that part of my life, the part that still had a hold on me, the part that Darian's rejection had tied me to even after I left, if I was finished with it. Calum was looking ahead, out the window. His profile was dark and still against the moving landscape. And are you? He asked. Yes, she said. I am. The car moved through the darkness, and she felt it, the full truth of what she had said, settle into her. The door was closed, not slammed, not broken down, not forced. Simply closed, the way a door closes when you are ready for it to, quietly and without ceremony. She turned to look at Calum. He was already looking at her. There were things she could say. She was good with words, particularly words that needed to be precise, and there were precise words available for this moment, for what she understood about him, for what she had been slowly understanding over 6 months of unexpected visits, and unhurried conversations, and the quiet accumulation of someone becoming important to you before you have quite registered that it is happening. She did not say any of them. Not yet. There would be time. They were going back to Caldonmere and he would sit at her kitchen table again, she was fairly certain, and they would drink tea, and the evening would slow down around them, and there would be time for the precise words. What she said instead was, "Thank you." He looked at her for a moment. In the moving dark of the car, she could see the steadiness in him, that quality she had come to rely on without ever deciding to, and she thought about the night he had first arrived at her door, bleeding and silent and entirely dignified, and how little she had known, then, that he was going to matter this much. "You did not need me," he said. "You could have walked into that room alone." "I know," she said, "but it was better this way." The ghost of something crossed his face. Not quite a smile. He rarely smiled in the full sense, but the warm, almost imperceptible shift of a man who has heard something that pleased him. She had learned to catch it. She was glad she had learned. The car moved on. Outside, the pine trees passed in dark rows, and the stars stayed steady above them, and the road was long and quiet, and Caldonmere was somewhere ahead in the night. She felt lighter than she had felt in 2 years. Not because the evening had gone well, though it had. Not because Darian had seen her, though that had mattered in ways she was still unpacking. Not even because of what Calum had said in the hall, though she was going to carry those words for a very long time. She felt lighter because she had closed something, because she had walked back into the life she used to have, and found that it no longer held her, that she had grown entirely past it, that the person she had become in Caldonmere was so fully and completely her, that she could stand in Darian's hall, in Darian's territory, in front of every person who had heard his version of her, and not feel, even once, like shrinking. She felt lighter because she knew, clearly and without reservation, who she was, and she had learned, over 2 years of building and working and waking up alone, and choosing again and again to keep going, that knowing who you are is the most solid ground there is. The clinic would be open on Monday. There were patients to see, remedies to prepare, letters to answer. There was a healer in the Eastern Territories who wanted to learn from her methods, and she had been thinking she might visit in the spring. There was so much work still to do, and she was not tired of it. She was energized by it, the way she had always been energized by work that was genuinely hers. And then there was Calum Dracath, who had come to her door one winter night with a wound she had stitched closed, and who had come back, and who had come back again, and who was sitting beside her now in the quiet dark of a car moving through the pine trees toward her home. She did not know yet exactly what that meant. She had told Darian, on the terrace, that they were still finding out, and that was the truth. It was also, she was beginning to understand, one of the most alive and interesting and frightening and genuinely wonderful things she had felt in years, the feeling of something beginning. Not the careful, self-protective beginning of someone who has been hurt and is moving very slowly. The real kind. The kind where you do not know yet where it is going, and you are not trying to control it, and you are choosing, actively and daily, to see what it becomes. The car turned onto the road, into Caldonmere. She knew these streets by now, knew every bend, every house with its lights on, every gap in the tree line where the hills opened up to the sky. This was her place. She had made it hers. Calum's hand found hers in the dark. No announcement, no ceremony. Just his hand, warm and certain, and her hand in it, and the two of them sitting quietly, while the town she had built her life in appeared around them, light by light. She did not say anything. There was nothing that needed to be said right now that the silence could not hold better. The car stopped in front of her house. The front light was on, the one she always left burning. The clinic sign was dark. The pine trees behind the house were a soft, steady sound in the night breeze. She looked at him. He looked at her. "Come in," she said. "I will make tea." He did not answer right away. He looked at her with those dark, steady eyes, in a way that she had come to understand, meant he was deciding whether to say the thing he was thinking, or save it. "Chamomile," he said. She laughed. Quietly, genuinely, the kind of laugh that comes from something true. "Chamomile," she said. She got out of the car. She walked to her front door and unlocked it, and stepped inside, into the warmth of her own house, the smell of dried herbs and clean wood, and the particular air that was entirely hers. She heard his step on the path behind her, She filled the kettle and set it on the stove and got the cups down from the shelf, the two she used every time without deciding to. The door closed. The kettle began to heat. Outside, the stars were still out, and the pine trees breathed in the night, and somewhere in Silverstone, a ceremony was being completed. Words spoken, promises made, an evening closing, as it had been planned to close. And it was fine. Let it close. Let it be what it was. Here, in a small house in a neutral town, Seraphina Vale stood at her stove and waited for the water to boil, and Calum Dracath sat at her kitchen table the way he had been sitting at it for 6 months, and the night outside was still, and the life she had built was whole and real around her, and the thing that was beginning between them was beginning quietly, the way the best things begin, without fanfare, without announcement, in the warm and ordinary light of a kitchen at the end of a long day. She had not expected, 2 years ago, when she drove away from Silverstone with her hands steady on the wheel and her heart broken and her future entirely unwritten, that it would end up looking like this. She was glad it did. She was glad she had kept going on the days it was hard to keep going. She was glad she had been honest with herself, about the work and about who she was, and about what she needed, and about the slow, surprising thing that had been growing in her life, without her fully seeing it until now. She was glad she had gone to that gala and stood in that room and not made herself smaller than she was. She was glad she had called him, 3 weeks ago, sitting at this same table with a cream envelope in front of her, and said, "I need to talk to you about something." She was glad for all of it. For the hard parts most of all, because the hard parts had made her into the person standing in this kitchen right now, and she liked that person. She trusted that person. She was proud of her. The kettle began to whistle. She made the tea.